Okay, let's talk about the slide entitled, Let's Build the World's Best Car. That's on page 12 in your handout if I've lost any of you. Let's assume that we want to build a really good car, but we don't want to totally redesign one. We just want to take components that already exist. So we say, okay, how about if we go across the world and we find the world's best engine, the world's best transmission, the best brakes, the best body, etc. And we take all those components which come from different cars and we assemble them to make a car. The chances are pretty good you're not going to have a very good car. Why not? They haven't been designed to work together. That engine may be far too powerful for that transmission. And so as soon as you hit the accelerator, it destroys the transmission. The same is true for an organization. When you do this to an organization, you wind up with what I call an organizational Frankenstein, a hodgepodge of disconnected parts that simply don't function together. And it actually happens totally by accident if you think about it, because each of the functions in an organization builds a silo around itself, tries to work totally independently of all the others, and the result is chaos. As it says on the next slide, you have to jointly optimize the three components. In terms of project management now, tools, systems, and people, again, have to be optimized to actually work together. Here's a very simple example of the problem. I show a diagram on the slide of a process that initially is balanced. The flow through the process is 100 units per hour. And each of the steps in that process handles exactly 100 units per hour. And then we decide we're going to improve the process. So what we do is we up the capability of the second stage so that it will actually produce 150 units per hour. The result is shown on the next slide. As you can see, we've improved stage 2 so that it'll handle 150 units per hour, but stage 1 won't produce that much input to that step, and step 3 won't accommodate that much output. So you haven't actually improved the overall process whatsoever, but you have the illusion of having done so. Now, in terms of project management, on the next slide I talk about training alone not being enough. And I've said this before, training addresses the people component only. And if that's all you do, you've done hit and run training, which is another example of sub-optimizing your overall organization. I know a couple of organizations that I've worked with over the years, one of which they've put 700 people through project management training. Another one has trained about 350 people. And again, a handful of people in the companies are using project management, but not everybody. If you consider results, they've spent an awful lot of money and they don't have nearly enough to show for it. But the illusion is that they have actually trained all these people and therefore the project management problem should have gone away. I'll tell you one other problem that I often encounter. They asked me at the PMI chapter meeting last night, you know, what's the optimum duration for one of these training programs? And I said, we've settled on a compromise. We've settled on a 3-day format as a compromise. I'd really like to have about 5 days for most of these programs, but you can't get people away from work that long without a great deal of grief. And I get a tremendous amount of pressure from managers and organizations to shorten this thing to a day. Can you just come in and do a 1-day program for them? And I said, well, what do you want them to be able to do when I get through? And they said, well, we want them to be able to run projects. And I said, well, they won't be able to do that. Well, what will they be able to do? And I said, they'll be able to talk about it, and not very intelligently at that. It'd be nice if you could get an MBA in a week, but you can't do it. It's going to take months to do it. And so we have to be realistic about how long it takes to do this. Now, at the very least, people shorten the program to 2 days. I refuse to do that. And I'll tell you why I refuse to do it. It isn't enough time for them to absorb what I want to teach them, what I consider to be the bare minimum. So what happens is they leave the class not fully qualified to do what they're supposed to do, but I have created the illusion in the minds of their managers that they've been trained, and then when they can't do what they are supposed to do, their managers start thinking, well, maybe it wasn't a very good training program. So it actually reflects back on me as a result. So it's not just the training, but it's also the quality of the training that we have to consider. Now, why, if you've given people the training, doesn't it take back on the job? Why doesn't it get the results you're looking for? I've talked about sub-optimization, but there's a couple of other reasons why we have a major problem. Number one, there are no systems in place to support the newly learned skills. As a matter of fact, one of the things that you find is that the reward system itself doesn't reward people for performing this new behavior. Another reason why you have problems is other employees actually resist having to do these new things. They're inclined to say, well, we've never had to do this project management stuff before, so why are you suddenly putting it on us? And there's no more dangerous place for an organization than to be successful, right? Because everybody gets complacent. They say, well, you know, we've never had to do this and we've been successful, so why all of a sudden are you putting this on us? And the answer is that we can't stand still forever. We've got to continue to grow. People also have difficulty performing newly learned skills. I call this performance anxiety. They get up in front of their group, they're going to put together a project plan, and even with the flow chart, you know, they look at this thing and they get down here and it says, write a mission statement. And everybody in the group is standing there looking at it, well, what are we supposed to do? How do you write a mission statement? And the poor person who's trying to lead the team is standing there wondering, I don't know exactly how to do this because it's uncomfortable. We've never done it before. So it takes time for people to develop newly learned skills to the point that they become competence. There's another issue that I think we've got to be very serious about, and it's a bit sensitive, and yet I think it's crucial. I have a colleague named Bob Osaki who talks about the accidental project manager. They happen to be in the right place at the wrong time or the wrong place at the right time, whichever way you want to look at it. And they become project managers by default because we needed somebody to do it. They have no aptitude for managing projects. You need to select people to be project managers who have the aptitude to do it. And I'll talk about this on the next slide. One of the aptitude issues that is absolutely crucial for project managers is the ability to deal with people. Now, in terms of dealing with people, we immediately run into problems with this with technologists. Project managers need a lot of people skills. And the reason for that is, as I've said earlier, they have a lot of responsibility, but they've got no authority. So the only way they're going to get anything done is through influence, negotiation, persuasion, and so on. So they've got to have people skills if they're going to get things done. Technical people are very prone to say to you, I really hate people problems. I've had them say this to me over and over again. I hate dealing with people problems. I had an engineer come up to me one day and he said, I want to ask you a question. He said, I understand if you're going to be a good manager, he said, you're supposed to take a personal interest in the folks that report to you. And you're supposed to ask once in a while, how's the wife? How's the kid? How's the family dog? He said, I don't care about any of that stuff. He said, what am I supposed to do? And I said, don't be a manager. He said, I thought so, but he said, my boss wants me to be one, so he said, I'm trying to keep an open mind. This guy had been out of school 15 years and was still doing differential equations. Does that tell you anything about his mindset? He's a techie. And if you force him to be a manager, you're going to lose a really first-class engineer, and you're going to turn out a mediocre or even a bad manager. It's not for everybody. If you look at the next slide, one of the things I advocate is that companies should have dual career paths. Most organizations don't. In order to make more money, you have to move from the technical branch to the management track. And even companies that claim to have a dual career path, you find that the technical track doesn't go as high as the management track. So these people become managers just to make more money, and then they're miserable at it. And generally when you're miserable at something, you don't do it very well. Another problem on the next slide, the working project manager. I ask people in my classes all the time, how many of you are trying to manage a project and do some of the work that has to be done? For example, if it's an engineering project, how many of you are also doing engineering work? Quite a few. The conflict that they invariably wind up having is that if there is a conflict between managing and doing technical work, the technical work always has priority and the managing suffers. The thing is, when it comes time for performance appraisal, the boss is likely to say, well, you know, you did okay on your technical work, but man, your management just wasn't any good at all. You need to improve that. Well, the best thing to do is eliminate the doing part if you want them to be managers and make them full-time managers. The alternative is that if you put a lot of pressure on people to get done on time or in record time, out of the 4 constraints on the project, the one that they tend to sacrifice is quality. They turn out one great big garbage dump. It happens all the time. Now, I think you can sort of have your cake and eat it too. And I think the way you do that is to have dedicated project managers. We don't have everybody in the building doing their own cost accounting. We don't have everybody in the building doing their own legal work. We don't have everybody in the building doing their own maintenance work. We have a maintenance department that does that. By the same token, we should have a project management function in which we can put people who have the aptitude and the desire to be good project managers. They can be dedicated to the profession. They can get really good at the job. And furthermore, it frees, if you have an engineering or technical group, it frees those people up to do technical work and get good at that. It is the best of all possible worlds. On the next slide, you also, and I'm now addressing primarily senior managers, you must provide the systems and the tools that are necessary for people to practice good project management. And you have to train more than just the project managers. As I've said earlier, you have to train their team members as well. Remember, even with the right project manager in place, you can't just give them the scheduling software and expect them to become good project managers. Giving me a saw is not going to make me a carpenter. I've got to be taught the principles of carpentry. I've also got to be taught how to use that saw. And one of the things I see happening with scheduling software, it is an enormously complicated program now, even the most simple of them. And so we give people Microsoft Project, Super Project, Timeline, whatever it may be, and we expect them to learn it on the job. They're too busy to do that, they get interrupted too much, and they never learn it in the depth that they need. Now there's another solution to this part. Pardon me. That solution is to have somebody designated as a scheduler. Let them do the scheduling for the entire department. Interestingly, that person can be at a clerical level, so it doesn't have to be a high-paid individual, and it'll save you a lot of money if you do it.
You had suggested having a dedicated scheduler?
Yes. Okay. Let me say something about that. I think it's a very expensive proposition to have all project managers spending a lot of time creating their own schedules in Microsoft or Primavera or whatever software you're using. A couple of reasons. Number one, most of the time they haven't had time to really learn the software in depth, so it takes them an awful lot of time to get that schedule put together. If you take a clerical level person or secretarial level person, and put them through training in project management so that they understand what the software is doing, and you then put them through some in-depth training in the software, boy, they're worth their weight in gold. So they can do all the scheduling for the whole department. They can do the project updates. They can go around once a week and gather status information, put that in the software. So they free the project manager to do what project managers should be doing, which is managing the project by running interference and coordinating things and, going to meetings, all that sort of thing. So I think that is ultimately the best possible solution. And I've had a couple of clients who have done that, and it truly has paid big dividends. Now, there's one caution. This doesn't free the project manager from needing to know what the software can do. So they need at least some minimal level of training in the software just so they can say to the scheduler, how do we do that? In thinking about where we are in this whole series of discussion, you may have the feeling that, okay, everything up to now has been kind of the downside, and it has. We've been talking about the problems, we've been talking about the reason why we have problems with project management. Now we're going to talk a little bit more about the cures, the fixes, because that's really what's important to all of you. And we're going to talk now about the role of senior managers. A lot of senior managers think that if they say to people, we support project management, we believe in project management, that that's all they need to do. Unfortunately, as Dr. Deming used to say, it takes a lot more than that. You not only have to support it, you actually have to drive it. meaning you have to say to people, I insist that you do it. And Tom Peters used to say, you need to change your calendar. If you think project management's important, you need to spend more time working on project management, talking about project management, and so on. So it's a driving role, not just a supporting role. One of the key roles for senior managers is shown on the slide entitled Project Portfolio Management. If a company doesn't begin with a clear vision for where they're going, nothing else is going to work right. And again, of course, this is a role of senior managers. So I'm going to assume that we have that part in place. The next thing we've got to have is a clear strategy for how to get there. That strategy is going to include a game plan in which we have a portfolio of projects. One of the examples that I like to use about portfolios came from an article in Harvard Business Review a few years back by the Chief Financial Officer of Merck Pharmaceutical. And she said, in the pharmaceutical business, you can't use net present value to justify projects, and you can't use return on investment. You have to use game theory and probability theory. You have to have a portfolio of projects in which some are high risk, some are medium risk, some are low risk. She said, we examine 10,000 compounds before we find one that actually makes it as a drug. 10,000. When you consider the enormous amount of money they spend before they find one compound that can be a drug, you understand the reason that they have to charge high prices to get that investment back before a competitor comes out with a product that knocks them out of the market. So project portfolio, again, is the responsibility of senior management. And these projects in that portfolio have to be prioritized so that they're done in the right order. There's a very important reason for this, and I'm not going to cover it in a lot of detail in this presentation, but unless you have unlimited resources, you can't do it all. We know that, we all do. But we sometimes lose sight of it in the day-to-day hustle and the pressures of the marketplace and the pressures from customers and so on. Select the projects that are important to you now, do them, and then move on to other projects instead of trying to do everything at the same time. There's a very important reason for this. There are big productivity gains to be made because when you do a lot of projects at the same time, you're constantly starting and stopping, starting and stopping. And every time you start and stop, you increase what's called setup time in manufacturing, which actually reduces your productivity. Now, we have a separate program called Developing Resource Measures at the Lewis Institute, and if you want to know more about this resource measures thing, you can look at that presentation. The next thing I want to point out in terms of this driving role of senior management is a story told to me by a fellow who came to one of my classes, and he got very excited about project management, and he went back to his job and he thought, okay, I'm going to do all this good stuff. And he got his team together and they went in a small conference room and they started developing a project plan. And his boss came by and looked through the little window in the conference room door and saw him in there and called him outside. He says, what are you doing in there? And this fellow said, I'm putting together a project plan. His boss said, oh, you don't have time for that nonsense. He said, get them out of the conference room and get them back on the job so they can get it done. Now, that tells you what this fellow believed about the value of planning, right? If you don't believe in this stuff, then obviously people aren't going to do it. So you not only have to support it, you have to drive it in that sense. Just to give you some idea of the payback, studies indicate that of every hour spent on planning, you will save 3 hours in execution time, assuming, of course, that people haven't gone into planning paralysis, and gone totally crazy. Rework costs will drop dramatically, and targets will be met much more consistently if you do a better job of planning. Okay, we've all heard this said before, but I'm going to reiterate it for everybody's benefit. Senior managers have to walk the talk. Again, you can't just say we believe in project management. You have to show through your actions that you really believe in it. People do what their bosses expect of them. If you think about it, the most important thing for you to do back at work is to satisfy your boss. If you don't walk the talk, people get the clear message that you really aren't serious about wanting project management. Here's some more suggestions. And these come back to the flow that I showed you a moment ago, where we link the vision to the strategy to the plan. You've got to link projects to your overall strategy. And I recently heard of a company where they didn't want to let anybody know what their strategy was because they were afraid for their competitors to find out. I submit to you, this is insanity. I understand their concern, but you can't achieve strategy unless all the employees in the organization help you achieve it. Senior management can't do it by themselves. So unless all the employees understand the strategy, they cannot execute it properly. And that linking must take place. Another suggestion, and this is a very radical one for some people, is to change to a project-based organization. Make project management a function just like information services. You want to develop a project management information system that provides project managers with the information on what's really going on in the project. There's a quip somebody made that says forecasting the future is easy. It's telling what's going on now that's difficult because I don't have the information I need. And you'll find that in many project organizations this is true. They don't have the information on what's happening. Another, develop a plan for project manager selection and development. It can't be haphazard. Just like you groom people to be senior managers, you groom people to be project managers. Another set of suggestions. Get used to doing regular lessons learned reviews. Make this part of the culture. And let me just say, a lot of people are afraid to do lessons learned reviews because they are embarrassed by anything negative. They don't want to share mistakes and errors and things like that. Well, keep them anonymous if you have to, or have fun with it. I've forgotten now who the senator is, the Proxmire Award or something, for biggest waste in government spending or whatever. Well, have a game with it. Who had the biggest goof up this month, you know, or made the biggest mistake, and give a prize for it, because it's important that people know what not to do and what to do. Ask people to see their project plans and their reports on projects. Sit in on their project meetings. Sometimes it's nice to sit in without announcing that you're going to be there. A little element of surprise can help dramatically, because in the future you can bet people are going to be prepared because they never know when you may show up. And develop a project management initiative. Now let's talk about that one. There's a slide here now entitled the Project Management Initiative. You can call this a task force, you can call it a team. A lot of people don't like these words, so whatever words you want to use. Select a high-level manager to lead the effort, one who believes in project management. I know that sounds obvious, and yet you see people put these efforts together and they have somebody heading the effort who doesn't really believe in it. So select a person at a high level to lead it who believes in project management. Then select a vertical cross-section of people from the organization to participate as part of this initiative, and have that group develop a plan to make project management a core competency in your organization. Part of the responsibility of this team is to develop a project management methodology. This is shown on the next slide. Otherwise, one of the problems you have, even if you get everybody trained, is that they all do project management just a little bit differently, so that nobody can look at each other's project plans and make sense of them. The components of that methodology are important. It should be in a manual, a loose leaf manual, that details the project execution process. That manual also details the project management process. It publishes expectations regarding process compliance. In other words, how are you going to show me that you've actually followed the process that you're supposed to follow? It also has well-defined project performance expectations. In other words, what are the allowable tolerances on your budget or your schedule or your performance criteria and those kinds of things. That needs to be spelled out. It also helps you develop and use standardized project forms and supporting procedures. So the project management methodology is aimed at getting everybody to do everything the same way, get them on the same page, so to speak. In conclusion, only if you attend to all of these factors can you become a world-class project management organization. As I've said earlier, the Lewis Institute has a holistic program for helping do this, in which we provide the training, we provide the support to project managers on an ongoing basis. We can mentor project managers. We help senior managers put the systems in place that are going to make project management work. And we also can help with the training and selection in tools. So if you have questions about this sort of thing, you can give us a call at the number shown on the slide. Check out our website. It has a lot of information on it. And let us know if we can help you. Thank you very much.